a fellow quite a few years ago, in the 70s, I believe it was approached to be on the draft board for the United States government. And he didn't want to. He didn't want to be a part of that. He was a Mennonite man. Didn't want to be a part of that, and he was coerced more and more. We want you to be there. We want you to be part of it. Well, you know that I'm coming from a non-resistant church. You know, we don't believe in that. I know, but we need your voice. We need your voice to be able to help give us guidance. So he decided to go to a meeting. And here in this meeting was a man who pulled out a great big briefcase file and started reading all about this man's life. He knew when he had graduated from school, what his first car was, when he had his first speeding ticket. He just knew absolutely everything about him. And that was before any smartphones, long before any smartphones. About 14 years ago, we had the group of a gospel team from Sharon Mennonite Bible Institute came through our region of southern Maine, and they had just been up in Canada, and somebody had come into the church. One of the last programs that they had given, someone came into the church basement and took off with a whole bunch of wallets and purses, and it was just the town pickpocket. They knew who it was, but he didn't know where he put everything at. And many of them didn't have their real passports. There was a young lady that was flying from Portland, Maine, down to, I think it was Honduras, but it might have been Nicaragua. Honey, do you remember? One of those Central American countries is where she was flying to, but she had no ID. Not the real deal passport, okay? She had a photocopy. Her parents had sent her, or the school office had sent a photocopy of her passport, but it still didn't have the real watermark and all that going on behind it. I took her to the airport and talked to a TSA agent and said, well, we'll get her through. Have her go down and check her bags. The people at the airline company didn't want to check their bags because she didn't have proper ID. Well, so we did that dance back and forth between TSA, and finally the airline company said, well, if TSA said we can get her on, we'll get her on. I don't care. They're the ones that have to figure it out. So we went up out of the Harrisburg airport just down the road here, and you go up into or Portland airport, but it's similar to the Harrisburg airport where you go upstairs for the TSA. And I talked to a fella because it was on a certain distance that I could go. Said, this young lady doesn't have any ID. It was stolen. We need to get her on the plane. Can we do that? Yeah, we can do that. So she went off with about 2 or 3 other officers standing over there in the corner. And I asked him, so what are they going to do? We're going to ask her questions that only she knows the answers to. I said, like what? Like how old she was when she lost her first tooth, how many cavities that she might have, whether her grandmother has dentures or not, or has glasses or not. And he proceeded with just a whole bunch more stuff. I said, and you guys know all of that? Oh yeah. So if you've been to the dentist, Uncle Sam already knows a whole bunch about you. One of the first things they look for in forensics, a forensic pathologist, well, let's get the dental records out to be able to identify who somebody is or not. So Uncle Sam, Big Brother, Big Government, the swamp, whatever you want to call them, they already know. So whether you tweet from your bedroom or you snap somebody or all that kind of good stuff, the caution is the king might find out. Then what? So just be careful what you send. We're ready for Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 10. What is it like whenever we fear the Lord, whenever we follow after His ways? Beginning of June, I told you that I was working on a house out in Great Falls, Montana, and I needed some extra help. Austin had helped me one day, and then he got a job at Albertson's food market, grocery store. He couldn't come back. It was on a Thursday when I went, and I said, but I need somebody. And the lady called me back and says, somebody just walked through the door. I think I've got something for you. So I took about the 5-minute drive over there to the temporary employment center. And here was Staten Eagle. He's a Native American fellow. He had just come into town the night before. He came into town and he says, well, I need a job. Came in off the reservation. Where can I go? Go down to this temporary service. They'll give you some employment somewhere. He said, and I walked in the door and they asked if I could work. I didn't even finish filling out all of my paperwork. And he was a really good worker. He really, really was. Some of his favorite words ended with a 4-letter word beginning with S. And, I need to stop saying that. It's a bad habit. And, oh my. I just kind of ignored it and went on. He worked for me for 2 days and learned to know just a little bit about him. And on the second day, he said, hey, can I bum $10 off of you to buy a pack of cigarettes? Like, no, not going to do it. Okay. I said, well, I don't smoke, and I don't drink, and I don't do drugs. And so I don't like when any of that happens on the property that I'm working at. So if you're going to smoke, got to be off the side. And so I'm not going to buy it for anyone else. You know, if you have it and you've got to stop for your smoke break, okay, but I'm not going to buy it for you. Well, that makes sense. I got started an expensive habit. I wish I could quit, but I just can't. Well, you see, I'm nervous. And I said, well, Staten, why are you nervous? Well, I just moved into town. My girlfriend called and said that she's carrying my baby. And in the Native American culture, it's a largely maternal culture. The mother has more to say oftentimes in the home than the dad. It's just largely maternal. And she had been up on the reservation with the rest of some of her friends up there. And he had to leave his job that he had. She says that she's not leaving town. She's not coming back to the reservation. She's staying right here in town, and it's her baby, so I have to do what she says. Staten grew up without having a godly home. But as I was listening to some of the gospel music over the music list that I had going on, we were ripping out one window, and he says, I think my grandmother would have liked you. I'm like, okay. I think a lot of people are like me, not? I said, oh yeah? He said, yeah, because she likes this music also. See, I'm also born again. And he pulls up a gold cross on a gold chain. See, I'm also born again. Well, that's good. It's encouraging music, isn't it? Yeah, it is, but I just don't listen to this kind of music. Well, he did when he was working for me for 2 days. I've had lots of people tell me they're Christians, but I haven't had hardly anyone tell me that they're born again. This young fella said, I'm born again. Now, we might enter into our own judgments of how righteous of a young fella Staten is or is not. But I want us just to step aside for just one moment. As we talked about some yesterday, none of us chose who our parents would be. Rich or poor, Christian or non-Christian, believer or unbeliever. None of us had that choice. Staten didn't either. Staten's trying to get along with life the best that he knows how. And yes, it is largely outside of God or knowing the ways of God and walking in the pattern that God has given. It's largely outside of that for sure. The book of Ecclesiastes here, fear God, keep His commandments. That's all that's required of you. This is the whole duty of man. That's all that's required of you. Okay? It's actually rather simple. Let's look at what he says in this next section of verses. When we fear God, things go well with us. Someone read verses 10 through 13. Chapter 8, verses 10 through 13. Those who fear God tend to do better than those who don't. Now, that doesn't mean that bad things won't happen to God-fearing people. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean there won't be reversals in life, whether it's financial reversals or health reversals or family issues. It doesn't mean that life is going to go perfectly well for someone who fears God and keeps His ways. But in general, a God-fearing man or a woman has a life that goes a little bit better than somebody who does not fear God. And he found this out. The wicked, they die, they're buried, they're forgotten. We don't remember the wicked as much as we remember somebody who was a stalwart within their community. There's more, when you walk around these grounds, you see names of important people, wealthy men who gave large sums of money to the college for another building project of some kind. The Hoover building, okay? There's a big plaque down there with his image on it. The Steinman Hall, the Brocker Center, the Nycary Hall. The list just goes on and on and on and on. How many people from those churches or those communities where they came from who were wicked, how many places do they have named after them? Soon forgotten. They might have been known as the town drunk, but there's nothing named after them. They didn't leave behind any kind of a legacy, or at least not a very positive one. And then he says here in verse 11, because the sentence against the evil deed, if it's not executed speedily, it's going to become worse. Brother Kenneth Leininger knows that better than me. Okay? Last night he had the announcement, all right, girls, lights out. I wouldn't have said it in near that tone of voice. But Ken is wiser than I am, and he knows, look, if you don't deal with it right now, it's going to become worse. Right? And that's some of the way I was as a teacher also. I knew how to bust somebody's chops and bring them into line if necessary. But for the most part, it was sometimes too much patience, I was told. Okay? He just says, look, if you don't deal with it now, it's going to get worse. Have you ever seen that in the grocery store, this 4-year-old pitching a tantrum? I'm counting to 3. 1, 2.5, 2.5. I'm almost at 3. They're just taking care of that at 2 months old or at 6 months old. Wouldn't be dealing with it now, right? Okay. Good verse. Good verse. Of course, we see this in our nation all around us also. Doing well versus doing evil. Even though a sinner could sin and do 100 times over, the godly has their life a little bit better off. Most of the time, better off. I'm thankful that I was born into the family that I was. That I didn't end up where Staten Eagle is at. Okay? I'm grateful for that. But it's not of my doings that caused me to be raised in a home where my mother and daddy took me to Sunday school and taught me to sing, Jesus loves me, this I know. I can't take any personal credit for that. But you, as you continue to live your life and as you reach out into the life of marriage perhaps, or a family of your own, or whatever career that God has called you to, live it after the statutes, the precepts, the way, the pattern of life that God has given. And most of the time, there'll be less pain involved. Any thoughts on these 4 verses? Even if there are hard times that come to it, maybe not as a result of our sin. Perhaps it is as a result of our sin. Okay? To remember that God works all things together for good. Anyone else? Okay, let's continue on this next section. Recognizing that in the fear of God, there are some times that we just have to scratch our head and say, God, I really don't know what you're up to. We can't understand all of the mind and all of the ways of the Lord. Someone read verses 14 and 15, and then someone else verses 16 and 17. Verse 14 there in particular, sometimes there are wicked things that happen to good people. And sometimes the wicked prosper and seems like everything is going very well with them. Very similar to what I said earlier. And I can't figure out why God lets that happen. Why isn't it that all the righteous people, the godly people, why is it that they don't, their farms and their businesses and their 401ks and so forth, all of that should just prosper really well. And the wicked should be the one that's always just never making it. I mean, that'll teach them. Then if they just become Christians, it'll work out good for them. See, there's not a fancy formula, is there? There's not a fancy formula. Sometimes the ways of God we just simply don't know. Who hath known the mind of the Lord, or who hath been his counselor? It's a rhetorical question because there is none. Job was given that opportunity whenever God was asking him the questions there at the very end of Job. If you were to be God for a while, what would you do first? Would you make it that all of your friends and all the Christians would prosper? Well, then people might want to become Christians so that they do prosper. And that's one of the challenges that takes place in third world country missions, where missionaries go in from Pennsylvania or from the Americas, and they go into a poor setting and they live life just really, really nice. People say, well, I want to become a Christian so that I can get your stuff, so they can live like that. That's one of the challenges that we have in missions, especially in second and third world countries. There are some of the ways of God that we simply cannot know. So apply your heart to wisdom and to seek out the way of God, the way that He wants you to go so that you can walk in His ways. And things have a bigger chance of going well with you. Again, perhaps not getting all of your wishes and dreams answered the way you would like to, but in general, things going well with you. And again, that does not mean whatsoever that if something is a reversal, that it's because of your sin or wickedness. Sicknesses, deaths, reversals, sometimes it's I have no explanation for that. It's the ways of the Lord and not as a direct result of our sin. Any thoughts before we go into chapter 9? The next group of verses levels the playing field in the graveyard. And we had looked at that earlier. He says, earlier in the book, he was asking the question, what's the point in being wise versus what's the point in being a fool? What's the point in being rich versus being a poor? They're both going to be dead pushing up posies anyhow someday. What's the point? What's the difference? Here it goes into a little bit of a longer expose of that in verses 1 through 6. Verses 1 through 6. Someone read verses 1 and 2, and then someone else verses 3 to 6. In examining and determined to examine all the ways of God, and is determined to examine what is the benefit of righteous versus evil and on, he comes to the conclusion it's in the hand of the Lord. God's hand has a bigger reason behind all of this than anything that we can comprehend, because all of us are going to come to this place called death. All of us someday will visit Sheol and be in that place of rest. And he says, and at that time comes all of the love that we had, all of the hate that we had, all of the envy that we had, whatever that you think is going on, that comes to an end. Doesn't mean that you're forgotten about necessarily. But for the person who dies, it doesn't mean that we forget them or that we quit loving them or whatever. But whenever a person dies and he or she is laid into the ground, it's over for them. It's done. there's nothing left. They can't love anymore. They can't hate anymore. They can't envy anymore. It's all over. What is it that you would like to do yet while you're living? Because we're coming to a spot where life is going to cease, and now what? And we might look around the room and say, well, yeah, some of these gray-haired or bald-headed men are going to get there before I do. Maybe. Maybe not. A living dog. Dogs were not their nice little great Sparkies in their day. They wouldn't have a little house dog like you and I might have today, okay? A dog was considered one of those scavengers. And a lion, they didn't have a pet lion either, by the way, but the lion, being the king of the beasts, this majestic creature, being able to walk around with all of his pomp, his pompous mane flowing in the wind, being able to roar, and it frightens everything else going on. And he says, even a living scamp of a dog is better off than a lion majestic king of the beast. Life is still better than death, but we're all going to be visited by death someday. Someday it's going to be all over, because this life is vanity, a vapor, a puff. This life is very quickly over. So what would you like to do yet? They didn't ask my opinion on the differentiations between the chapter and verses, but I would have included these verses with the last half of chapter 8. I would have put those all together in the same chapter, but they didn't ask my opinion, so that's where it's at. Any thoughts before we go into the last portion of 9? Because 9 links closely with chapter 10. Okay, someone read verses 7 to 10. All right, I misspoke there. These verses would go with that. I would have divided it up so that chapter 8, verses 10 through 9:10 would be all together into one, and then 11 would be a separate one. But anyhow, because death is certain, and because death, we don't know when it's going to happen, enjoy living a little bit, okay? Again, be careful. Don't go back and tell your pastors that Wilmer said just live it up, eat, drink, and be merry. That's not what I said. But enjoy life just a little bit. Enjoy living. Eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a merry heart. God has already approved what you're doing. When we follow after the ways of the Lord, we don't have to ask Him every little question that happens. He's already approved of us because we're His son or we're His daughter. And so we don't have to ask, Lord, is it okay if I drink a cup of water here right now? Or no, drink a cup of water if you get thirsty. Some go to great lengths to try to determine who it is that they should marry. And the question here says about enjoying the, where did I see it? Verse 9, enjoying the wife of that you love. Some within the purity culture have come to the conclusion there's a perfect wife or perfect husband that you should marry. There's one in particular that God has picked out and nobody else. And now there's so much going on of how can I find this wife? How can I find this life partner? And it went from extremes. My dad's generation had the extreme of a little bit more loose dating, perhaps. Some of them would date 3 different girls in 1 month, and it wasn't a big deal. It was part of social life. And then they had this term, now these two are going steady. Now that meant you couldn't go around and keep dating everybody else, all right? You figured, didn't mean they're engaged, but hey, they're locked in. You can't ask her out, the one that I took that night, the night before, okay? And there might have been a little bit more looseness involved with that. But then along comes the 80s and the 90s with the purity culture, and now it came the idea, dating is evil. We were courting. And that became the big catchword. And now the young fella needs to pray and fast and seek God's face, and then he needs to go and date the dad of the girl that he's interested in for a little while. And after he's dated him for a little while, then can I ask him out? And some of them have gone to the extent of he writes her a letter, but it gets to be passed through his dad, to her mother, and then to the daughter, because all this has to be approved first of all. And hey, did you hear that John and Sally are courting? They're not dating, they are courting, and I wonder when they're getting married. Bang. And it had all this hands off. Be careful even how close you look. Like my daughter would say, there's enough room for Jesus and the martyr's mirror between them on the couch. Some of you haven't figured out how much space that's supposed to be. I won't look. I won't judge. Okay? But there was this idea that you dare not touch, you dare not. A young fellow, a teacher that I know was teaching at SMBI a number of years back, and there was a young lady there who had just begun courting, just before she went to Bible school, and within her youth group there was a lot of bro hugs and just, hey, how are you doing? Between man and woman, it didn't really matter. It was just one great big happy family, okay? But now she starts courting, and so this is going to be a problem. Well, a group of her youth from her church came to visit her at SMBI one weekend, and they surprised her, and here she comes through all of them, and hi, it's so good to see you, and she's hugging all the girls and all the guys that come through, and her boyfriend is last, and it's... And she complained to the teacher friend, she said, there's something that was just wrong about that. And he's like, do you think? Yeah, there is something a little wrong with that. And so my generation, that came along, and that was a normative thing. And then our children's generation comes along a little bit later on, and they're afraid. Because now they grew up in a culture where after every play in volleyball, you high-five everyone, man and woman. Look, it was just a spike. It's not that big of a deal. We're going to do it again here next play. But no, you've got to high-five everyone, and there's almost no boundaries now, and they're afraid because mom and dad have always told this thing, courted your mother. And they have this utopian idea of how they should behave. And they don't know, and they're scared. Young people, live a little. No, don't be frivolous. But I think that both extremes, or all three extremes, I think they're just that. They're extremes. They bring about some things that are not so good. See, out of the purity culture, there were plenty of divorces. There were plenty of affairs that took place. And then here's what would happen. When life got tough and they were in their 30s and 40s, and they would come along somebody else, and life has been tough, it's like, yeah, that high school sweetheart. You know what? I just misheard the Word of God. I missed the Word of God. I'm supposed to be with her after all. Instead of, as Solomon said, learning to love the wife of your youth. Okay? You have to learn how to love one another. And I'm still learning after 29 years. Okay? Not quite as big of a learning curve as it was, but I still am enjoying the wife of my youth. There was a fellow that I spoke with not long ago, and he's been married for quite a few years, but not so with his brother. And he asked his brother, who had lived rather frivolously for a while. Both of these would have grown up in a Amish/beachy home out of the Belleville area, who had been divorced and remarried, and life just hadn't gone very well for him. And my friend asked him about his wife, about his marriage. He said, "Man, I've been married for 30 couple years. They've been married a little longer than Charlene and I. And he said, I love my wife." He said, "See, that's the difference between you and me," this brother told my friend. He said, "The difference is you loved your wife. I didn't know how." Okay? You have to learn how to love your wife. You have to learn to figure out how to love your husband. Enjoy life for a little bit. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain or small, short life that you have here under the sun, because we don't know when that life is going to be over, do we? Some of you would know my cousin, or at least his family, who was on his way home from work, ready to go to graduation, and had a motorcycle accident there on 75 just north of Fort Loudon. He was only 33 years old. His wife and family were ready to go over to Mountain View for the graduation service. He was chairman of the board, supposed to be the one to give the graduates, who would be his wife's youngest sister, her diploma. He never made it home. All of a sudden, it was over at the young 33 years old. And Solomon is telling us very, very plainly, look, learn how to love your wife or your husband, because you don't know how much more time that you have. And do it with everything you've got. Verse 10. I think this also it's linked on to the marriage clause here. It's not just about your work. But love your wife or your husband with all of your might, the best you can, because Sheol, the place of death, is coming, and we don't know when that is. Of course, verse 10 can apply to anything else. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might. There's nothing that irritates me the most that I've got to bite my tongue more whenever I'm going to be on a team with someone playing volleyball, basketball, softball, whatever it is, and they're just kind of halfway there. It's like, you know what, give it all you got. I don't care if you pop out. At least give it all you've got. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Any thoughts here on these verses? Okay, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start looking at some basic Proverbs, chapter 9, verses 11 through most of chapter 10. Often, there's a couple little groups of these Proverbs that fit together, but some of them are just one proverb and then the next one being something completely different. And let's take a look at that whenever we come back. Okay, let's continue on. I'd like to have a couple of people help read some more here from Ecclesiastes 9. We're going to finish the last part of this chapter, dividing the remainder of these verses up into two sections. And so if someone would read verses 11 through 14, and then someone else 15 to 18. 11 to 14 and 15 to 18. And the general understanding is, yes, we're all going to come to a place of Sheol someday. We're all going to come to the grave, live life a little, enjoy life. And by the way, I want to be really clear with what I was saying earlier about enjoying the wife of your youth, learning to love her, learning to love your husband, or how you get there by means of courtship or dating or whatever it is. Get your parents involved, and I really don't care what you call it. If you got to date the dad first, hey, just make sure it's worth it, okay? Do whatever your deal is. It's okay. But there's not a magic system, there's not a magic formula that's going to get you to the finish line, okay? Because we all have within us a heart of flesh that wants to do what we want to do, and sometimes that might be things that are not as pure as what God's Word tells us to do, okay? So I live through the purity culture. I have seen the benefit in some small ways, but I've also seen a lot of devastation come from it. So it's not the one-size formula that's going to heal all of the woes whenever it comes to pre-marriage relationships, okay? All right, so I want to make sure that I will honor whatever you choose, and I'm not going to make fun of you. I've been in enough of circles who this is the magic formula, and it doesn't work out. That's because the magic formula does not exist, and some aspects of it are not even biblical. So this section speaks that wisdom is still better than folly. Even though the wise person is going to die and push up posies, even though the foolish guy that has simply been the fool, he's been stupid in his decision making that he has had, he's just been simply foolish outside of God. Even though they're both going to find their way to the grave, it's still a whole lot better to be wise than a fool. And that's what these two passages, that's what the rest of this chapter is about. So go ahead and someone read that. Yes. So just because you're wise doesn't mean that everything just falls in line for you. As Desiree read, it just simply doesn't always work out that way. And the illustration that is given, that sometimes the poor person has lots of wisdom to it and is able to help conquer a city or to keep a city from being conquered because of a poor man or a poor woman's wise word. There's at least two accounts in the Bible that speak to that where this actually happened. Do you remember what those two accounts were, Old Testament? Okay, that's not the one that I was referring to, but there were a time where the lepers went into the camp after the Assyrians were destroyed and went back and said, hey, we have food out here, because they just simply fled on foot. It's not what I had in mind, but they definitely showed lots of wisdom whenever they brought it back and said, we can't keep all this good to ourselves. And they brought it back and shared it. There you go. There you go. And that guy was cocky enough that he's like, hey, run me through. I can't have it said that a woman killed me. You know, so the idea of misogyny didn't just start here in the last 20 years. He had his idea about it too, okay? But she knew enough. He was running too close. She knew enough to drop a millstone on his head. One more account. During David's life, it was after he had come back from that Absalom deal, and there was a rascally fellow that was doing nothing but stirring up trouble. And Joab was sent to go after him and to take him out, and he hid in the city and shut all the city gates, and he's hiding there. And Joab with his army has a great big outpost of people around him. And there's a lady that says, hey, wait a minute. I know you're a man of war. I know you kill people. That's what you do. But are you going to kill all these innocent that are in here also? Who is it that you're looking for? Well, I'm looking for this man, Sheba. You give me him and I'll let you go.
Nabal.
And so she was wise enough. Nabal, that would happen later on, but this count, she was wise enough, and she came and had the rulers catch this rascal, take his head off, and she dropped the head over the wall to Joab. Joab says, thank you very much, and he left, and it saved all the city. Okay? There's times whenever this actually happens. You don't have to be somebody, well, I can't do it because I'm not the Secretary of Defense. I can't do that. I'm not somebody really... Sometimes a poor wise man has some really good words to say within a city or within a church or within a youth group. Wisdom is better than the weapons of war, and the words of the wise heard whenever it's quiet is better than shouting at the ruler amongst a whole bunch of fools. We get that these days, don't we? this idea that from the quiet and from the poor, we get direction. There's a study that was done recently on 6-month-old babies. Whenever it came to learning and adapting to fear or things that showed fear. 6 months old. So I'm sure all of you have seen or experienced some 6-month-old around. But it took place over in Sweden. They did a study bringing a whole bunch of 6-month-old babies in, and they blindfolded the mothers so that the mothers could hold the babies, but the mothers could not see any of the pictures of these babies were going to be shown. That way a mother couldn't have some kind of a response that holding this little tiny baby would be able to, the baby could pick up on the mother's tenseness and reactions and respond, in tandem or shortly after the mother. So they took these babies, took them into a room, used infrared eye trackers and scanners, noting these little babies and their pupils, and in the amount of time of several seconds, they would show them pictures of flowers, different flowers that are around, vibrant flowers, and then they would show them pictures of spiders. And on every one of these 6-month-old babies, their pupils dilated, and they tended to react whenever they saw a spider versus that of a flower. So there you go. If you have the arachnophobia and you don't like to be around spiders, it happens to poor innocent little 6-month-old also. The dilations and the fear flinching would happen within milliseconds, and they were able to measure all of that. So they said, well, maybe it's not just it's a difference of pictures that were taking place. So using photo editing purposes, they painted all the flowers to be the same color as the spiders, and vice versa. Then later on, they painted all the spiders to be the same color as the flowers, to make sure they weren't simply responding to a change in color. And no matter, these small little 6-month-old babies who still cannot even talk yet reacted to, in fear, to the pictures of spiders versus that of a flower. This whole idea that the itsy bitsy spider ran up the water spout doesn't really cut it for all of them. They would change them around over and over, and little differences would take place. They did it also between snakes versus fish. And fish they were rather calm with, and snakes they had some alarm to it. Being able to test with eye scanners, small minute changes taking place within the pupil of a little baby. In understanding wisdom, when we look at the small babies, we look at a child shall lead them, as prophesied to happen yet in the future, that even a child shall lead them. And sometimes children lead us even now, don't they? Sometimes even children know things with better wisdom than what we do. Our second daughter, when she was only about a year old, she was just quite the storyteller. And after coming home from a hard day of work, I was sitting down reading a magazine. Yeah, this was before we had smartphones and laptops and that type of thing. And I'm paying attention to my book, and I was listening. She was wise enough to know that I wasn't. She reached up with her chubby little hands on both sides of my cheeks and twisted around. Dad, you have to look at me to listen. We do, don't we? We do. If I'm not looking at her, I'm not listening to her. And so how often do we sit down and yeah, what'd I say? I don't know, huh? Yeah, still happens to all of us, doesn't it? Even a child shall lead them, and there's some simple wisdom principles that we're going to find here through chapter 10 that really is not rocket science. It's not something great that some great big wise person has to know and have to understand. It's just like, well, yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. As flies are in a perfumer's ointment at the apothecary, like you would put something rotten in something that's supposed to be sweet smelling, and it just spoils it. It just messes it all up. So it is whenever a wise man does something stupid. Okay? He's a wise man. He's lived a ripe old life. And all of a sudden he does something that's really, really foolish. And we're like, seriously? I mean, you were that old and you messed it up at that age? Oh man, come on. Couldn't you have waited a little bit longer till you're pushing up posies to do that? So these list of proverbs are something that a small child can understand and perhaps could have given. Verse 2, a wise man's heart inclines him to the right, and a fool's heart to the left. The idea of left and right chambers of Congress, or there on the right versus there on the left, that didn't just show up in the last 30 years. That's been around for a long time. Those that are on the right are on the right, the wise on the right, the fools on the left. That doesn't mean there's no Democrats that aren't wise, and that doesn't mean that all the Republicans are, okay? But there's this basic idea. Which side are you going to be on? You need to choose. To simply vote present is not enough. You need to actually choose. Even when a fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everybody that he's a fool. He just proclaims it loudly. Have you seen some of the bumper stickers that are on cars these days? It's like, what were you thinking to even put that on? I mean, by the way, I already know you believe that and you're a fool in that way because I can tell how you're driving. You didn't even have to tell me. But thanks for telling me anyway. Now you don't have any doubt about yourself. At least he's not pretending. If the anger of a ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. Have you heard that passage? A soft answer turns away wrath. Even if the boss, even if the ruler is coming at you, just busting your chops over something, stuff is just not right and giving you the riot act, it's better for you just to remain calm, as calm as you can, and say, I'm sorry, sir, what can I do to fix it? What do you want me to do? To give the lip back. How well do you think that's going to work? You know, there's these guys that have their YouTube channels, and all they can do is to see if they can rile up a policeman somewhere. Well, what's my charge? I don't have to give you my ID. I'm a sovereign citizen. I don't have to get... You know what? Just give him your ID. It's not that hard, not that complicated. You just made life tough for yourself. Don't play the fool. Verse 5. There's an evil that I've seen that's under the sun. It's been an error that's proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in low place. I've seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. He's been able to see some things that are out of place. Just because you're a ruler, just because you have royal blood does not mean that you always make the smartest decisions. Hello, we can look around at our government to see that, right? And perhaps we can even look around at our families or our church communities and be able to see it. Okay? Some people will get the idea that, yes, I'm in this position, and they develop or they create a self-created halo that they walk around with. But before too long, their head grows up through the halo, and that halo becomes a noose to them. Because they feel like they're untouchable. They develop that type of a mentality that I'm untouchable because I am the boss. I said so. It's not going to get you very far. And sometimes the foolish person is in the top. What's that? Yeah. He's seen slaves on horses and princes on the ground. Where's an illustration of that taking place in the Bible in the Old Testament? Someone who was a little bit lower in class got the privilege to ride around on the horse, and the higher class guy had to walk. Mordecai. How did that go over for Haman? Not too good. See, there's something that's just kind of about that, right? And it doesn't take too many smarts to be able to come to that conclusion. Verse 8, he who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. Have you ever been out working hard with it, and trying to get out get these rocks out of the way, and now there's an avalanche that comes down on top of you? Whether it's with rocks or with wood. And then a really very wise statement here, verse 10. If the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. Well, duh. Try to split wood with a dull axe. Well, you still can. You just have to work harder. So sharpen it. Sharpen it up just a little bit so you don't have to work quite so hard. Now you don't have to use as much strength. And wisdom also helps one to succeed. When we walk in the way of God, when we walk in the pattern of life that He has given for us, and whenever we fear Him and keep His commandments, keep the edicts that He has given, and we don't waver on those, recognizing that some of the commands of God that He has given, they're just that. It's an order. Here it is. This is what I expect my people to live by. And to walk in that way with wisdom, it's like sharpening your knife before you try to butcher something. It's like sharpening your axe before you try to split wood. It just goes a whole lot easier in life if you just use wisdom, and maybe a lot of it. If a serpent bites before it is charmed, there's no advantage to the charmer. I am fascinated by snakes, and not everybody in my family has the same fascination. Okay? Well, I want to see the thing. Honey, you're getting too close. But he's so pretty. I mean, the design of that diamondback is incredible. Wow. And look at that nice triangular head. I mean, a black snake doesn't have a triangular head. Look at this one. And he's sticking his tongue out, not because he's mad at me. He's not going nanny boo boo at me. He's just trying to figure out who I am and where I'm at. Isn't he fascinating? No, he's dangerous. And some of these guys that go out there and try to grab a rattlesnake barehanded, right behind the head. Yeah, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. I don't know. Snakes just absolutely fascinate me. I'm a weird one that way, I guess. To be able to watch it, all of a sudden he disappeared because the way he tracks himself, and they have their different ways of tracking. I respect them. I recognize what their danger is or is not. But there's something fascinating about him. And then whenever you happen to kill one, that just soft, velvety, scaly skin that it has, there's something just beautiful about that. I told you I was weird. The person who says, oh, but I can pick him up and make a pet out of him, if it bites him to begin with, all of his charming went to nothing. I'm not a snake charmer. I'm charmed by them, but I'm not a snake charmer. Okay? And they're quite fascinating indeed. Whenever it's cool out, they don't move quite as quickly. And so you can get quite a bit closer to them, but still respect them with who they are. Just don't, while your wife is looking at them, don't go up and grab her by the ankle. That would not be a good thing. Or your girlfriend. Or your mother. Verse 12. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. Who would you rather be around? Someone who is gracious with wise words, or somebody who's just always telling some kind of a foolish story? All right, it might be fun to be around the court jester for a moment, for a few minutes, to get some laughs out of it for the moment. And okay, yeah, that's funny. But then after a bit, it's like, all right, that's all over now. It vanished away. Looked at that a couple chapters earlier. It vanished and went away. But somebody who's wise can just sit down and pick their brains for a while. One of the reasons that Amos is my friend, that I enjoy being around Amos, just enjoys sitting down and visiting with him. He's been around a little longer than I have, and he's got some wisdom I'd like to have. Sometimes we discuss the Bible, sometimes we discuss the facts of life. But I enjoy being around him. Who do you enjoy being around? Someone in your church? Grandpa, perhaps? Someone here that you just enjoy being around because they have gracious words from a wise man, and they think of things that perhaps you haven't. That's why you go to them for counsel. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness, referring back to that end of the fool at the end of chapter 12. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him. Somebody that always has things to say and always exaggerates over and over and over again. They have exaggerations of maybe there's expletives that's part of their conversation that's going on, but they go over and above. After a bit, it doesn't take very long, you start saying, what part is really true and what part isn't? I mean, if you have to come off with the phrases, I swear to God, across my heart, hope to die, this is the honest truth. It's like what Jesus said, just let your yes be yes, and you don't have to go to all of those different things. Okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. When somebody goes to all those events, I start to say, all right, now what's he going to say that's not going to be true? And it doesn't take very long working with people. You'll soon pick up on that. The toil of a fool wearies him, for he doesn't know the way to the city. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning, but happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. The idea would be that out of royal blood flows wisdom and flows some type of nobility. You can't marry outside of another noble family, and this becomes big issues in countries that deal with monarchs and nobility completely different than ours. But yet there's a part of that that still rises up in today's politics. He's never been a politician before. He can never be governor or president. He's just a common man. Okay? And some of that happens also. And then whenever he is, if he's just simply a child, he's going to have all of his buddies come and he's going to feast on, he's going to lavish on all of his buddies, all the feasting, all the drunkenness that goes on, because after all, we're good buds. And he says, watch out, city, when that happens. When did that happen in the Old Testament? Rehoboam. Rehoboam gets into the office, and he was noble, he was royal blood, the son of Solomon. And he gets all of his pals to come in and to feast with him. And whenever they said, hey, would you give us some good counsel? Well, what does my buddies have to say? Didn't quite go so well, did it, for Rehoboam? Okay? Did Solomon write this having a good idea of what his son would do? Or is he writing this hoping his son listens just a little bit and doesn't do the opposite? Again, I think that Ecclesiastes was written largely at the end of his life, but who knows? But it's still true, yes. Through slothfulness, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, or just quarrelsome, the house leaks. Have you ever been around a house that's been neglected for a long time? And that roof is just simply caving in and caving in and caving in. In Fort Lauderdale, where our daughter and son-in-law live, the purchased a building that they want to make into a worship center, worship place. Something had caved in on the roof some time back, and nobody had fixed it. In fact, there's so much regulations there in Fort Lauderdale, they have to get permission to fix it. And that's why you see so many blue tarps scattered all over the place. But a blue tarp can only be there for so many weeks before it has to be replaced or removed or what. And to try to get the code officials to come back and say, hey, can't you see this hole in my roof? I can see the sun here during the day. I can see the moon at night if I'm standing at the right spot. And it's just caving everything in and destroying the floor. Can't you let me fix it? Well, I have to come out and inspect it first before you can fix it. Inspect it afterwards. It's raining inside. No, we got... Okay. Regulations and code laws, they are what they are, but it causes all kinds of havoc. And as long as that hole is in the roof, it's going to cause more rottenness and mold and decay on the inside. That's slothfulness. All right, this is a vivid picture of an actual house. Now, I want you to think of your life as being a house for a moment, okay? Your life is a house. What would be an area that would be your roof leaking? And I'm not talking about somebody being a few fries short of a Happy Meal either. I'm not saying that guy's his roof just leaks. What would be some areas, what would be some avenues of our life that could be like a roof that is leaking, and that if we don't take care of it, it's going to get worse? See, there's a lot of these proverbs that you find in the book of Proverbs, but for sure here in Ecclesiastes also, that we can apply to just any aspect of our life. The idea of joy, the idea of sorrow, the idea of death, the idea of life, love our wife or our husband, genuine love, working at it, fixing what is broken for just a short amount of time before it gets worse. Through slothfulness, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. Do you agree with all of that? Well, everything costs money. Show me enough money, and everything's for sale. I've heard that lots of times. It's only money. Just swipe the card. Go to Grandpa. He'll get you the money you need. Come on, it's only money. You pay it back. Was helping to build a house for a contractor down north of Waynesboro, and we were putting siding on the house, and the homeowner kept coming around and looking, and we're almost finished with the house, and the developer came over to the fellow I was working for, LaRon Martin. Some of you know him. And he said, I made a mistake. I ordered the wrong kind of siding for that. We have the color right, but it's supposed to be beaded siding, not Dutch lap. Some of you who are in contractors know that. Well, now what are we going to do? Is she okay with it the way it is for less money? Nope. Got to take it down and get the right stuff. So we've been working this for, I'll pay you. I lost more money at Atlantic City last weekend. It'll be all right. It's only money? Yeah, hopefully we don't look at money. Hopefully we have a little bit better idea of Christian stewardship than that. But it is true when it says money answers everything. But only temporary. It's only temporary answers everything. Okay? After a bit, the money runs all. Or after a bit, the price gets too high. And regret is always higher price. Verse 20. Even in your thoughts, here's the Twitter one. We already looked at this one. Even in your thoughts, don't curse the king. Nor in your bedroom, don't curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, and some winged creature will tell the matter. Any thoughts here on chapters 8, 9, and 10 that we looked at? There's things about the ways of the Lord that are beyond our understanding. There's one thing that's common for all of us, and that is we're going to die someday. Enjoy living while you have it. It doesn't mean, I didn't say live it up, but I said enjoy living just a little bit. Don't be burdened down so much with all the worries and the what ifs. You can become old and live a life of woulda, shoulda, coulda, and it's like, you know what, if you just relax, but you didn't. You didn't all of the woulda, shoulda, coulda. This is the decision that you made, so you know what, you have to live with it for a little bit. Can you change that decision? Well, only to a degree, but I can't unring a bell. You can't undo what has already been done. And once you take that big old clapper and ring that bell, you can't make it unring. Okay? Many times we have decisions, or our decisions are given to us only once in life, the real big ones anyway. And whenever we use the wisdom that God has given to us in His Word, that He has shown to us, when we ask Him for directions, when we honor His Word and say, Lord, I'm so thankful that I'm your daughter, I'm your son. Thank you that you are my Father who is in heaven, and I just want to please you and I want to represent you well. Just like when we go to reunion and Grandma says, you look just like your mother did whenever she was your age. I want people to be able to look at me and say, somehow you look just like God does. Through your actions and through your life, you look like what I would picture my Heavenly Father to look like. I want that to be my testimony. I want that to be your testimony. And it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're old or young, whether you're rich or poor. That can be the testimony for all of us. And whenever that becomes our regular prayer, Lord, just live in me and through me so much that my life is just a reflection of you to those who are around me. We can have the words of the wise instead of the multiplied words of the fool. And we can have the actions of the diligent instead of the inactions of the slothful. And God will establish our paths and our goings. And no, it doesn't mean there will never be any adversity that comes our way. But God will be with us in and through those moments of adversity. We'll continue reading the last two chapters here, chapters 11 and 12. There's some more fascinating proverbs here in chapter 11. And then when we get to chapter 12, he's going to tell us why he has given all of this counsel to us. Remember your Creator while you're young. Other than that, the evil days come. And he starts listing all of the biology that starts to fail. And there's a whole lot of it, and he gets quite descriptive about it. And you get around, if you become a CNA at a nursing home, you're going to experience all of this, okay? It's just the way life runs. It's just the way biology works whenever you're old. And so Solomon, I'm not sure how much of this he is personally experiencing whenever he writes these words. But he says, remember your Creator now that you're young. After a while, it's going to be old, and there's going to be some things that's like, you know what? Am I still alive today? Shucks, man, I was hoping I would die in my sleep last night. Because it's just going backwards. Lord bless you real good. Thank you. You've been a good audience. You've been a good group. Thank you again for helping to read the text. And we'll look forward to wrapping it up tomorrow. And hopefully be able to give you some more nuggets, give you some more truths that you can leave here full of joy and full of purpose, ready to live the rest of your life beyond here in the fear and in the wisdom of the Lord. Lord bless you each one. You're dismissed.